Hello, everyone. First of all, I'm truly honored and delighted to give a lecture as a part of the ISDP Nordic Next Generation program, and my sincere thanks to ISDP for inviting me to this meaningful occasion. And it's a pleasure to meet you all. My name is Jeenou E, and I serve as the president of the International Division at the Korea Young Leaders Forum. Like you all, I am also a young professional myself. That is why I like today's lecture to take on more interactive format rather than just a unilateral style of lecture. So please feel comfortable listening. I just want to lecture the overview of the presidency of Lee Jae-myung and the new South Korean Lee administration. And after that, I hope we can have an engaging exchange during the Q&A session. So, as I mentioned, today's lecture will cover an overview of President Lee Jae-myung and the new administration in South Korea. To begin with, I'd just like to introduce myself first. So, as I mentioned, I'm currently co-founder and president at the Korea Young Leaders Forum. To briefly introduce our forum, we are a bipartisan think tank and platform of young professionals dedicated to Korean Peninsula issues. So our mission is to help reduce polarization in South Korea's foreign policy and security debates, particularly on North Korea, by fostering a dialogue and cooperation. And we also strive to serve as a platform for exchange and policy discussion among both young professionals in Korea and internationally. And also, I was a guest researcher at the Stockholm Korea Center ISTP this May to June. I had a great opportunity of exploring Nordics perspective when it comes to the foreign policy and Korean Peninsula issues. It was a great time there in Stockholm. And before that, I was in Washington D.C. until last year. I worked at the U.S. Congress and Korean National Assembly as an intern. So that's my just bit of my background. So I just want to start the presentation right away. So the table of content for today. The topic is the presidency of Lee Jae-myung. So I'll structure it into seven parts. So I just want to touch upon the bit background of who is Lee Jae-myung and his political career, and then just very simple background for the foreign policy and national security strategies, and also his domestic policy priorities. So I think many of you already seen and explored his agenda. So I just want to keep that short, and then I'll spend more time on the key appointments and the party government relationship and political landscape, and also the future outlooks and challenges. So let me begin. Who is President Lee Jae-myung? It's a bit of background of him, as more personal life. I think in one sentence, I think it's best to describe him as a from child labor to president. He actually born in 1963 in Andong, but he moved to Seongnam City during childhood, which later became the base of his political career. Seongnam City is right below the Seoul city, but during back in the 1960s and 70s, the Seongnam City is kind of like a lot, there's been a lot of factories and a lot of like factory workers live there, and also there are a lot of some kind of the poor places and poor living conditions, especially during the Seongnam in back in 1960s and 70s. I think after finishing elementary school, he worked as a child laborer for 6 years. And during his working life as a factory worker, he passed the high school equivalency exam and entered to Chunghwa University College of Law on a scholarship. And he passed the bar right away after the graduation, and he began practicing as a lawyer in Seongnam, and he actually led a lot of civic movement in Seongnam in 1990s, including the establishing of the Seongnam City owned hospital for more comprehensive access for the whole Seongnam citizens. And it's a bit of the political career at a glance. In 2005, he entered politics, and he first ran unsuccessfully for Seongnam mayor as a Democratic Party candidate in 2006. But 4 years later, he elected as a mayor of Seongnam, and he re-elected, so he was a mayor of Seongnam for almost 8 years. During his mayoral years, I think there are three major free welfare policies that made Mayor Lee Jae-myung more famous. The first one is the youth dividend, And the second one is free school uniforms. And the third one was the public postpartum care. So he actually provided to more comprehensive free welfare policies for young people and pregnant women and high school and middle school students. And then in 2017, he ran in the Democratic Party's presidential primary. For the first time, he actually attempted to be the party's official candidate for the presidency, but unfortunately, he finished third. And a year later, he was elected as the governor of Gyeonggi Province, which is the largest province of Korea, consisting of over 10 million population. And during his gubernatorial years, he also became popular when it comes to the implementation of youth basic income and his strong leadership in the cleanup of illegal facilities in valleys. For instance, the basic income for young people, I think it was a policy providing almost $200 in local currency per quarter, and I think up to $800 per year to 24-year-olds who have either resided continuously for the past 3 years or for a total of 10 years in the province. And also, as I mentioned, he gained wide popularity for decisively addressing the issue of unauthorized restaurants in valleys and mountain tourist areas of Gyeonggi Province, which had long been operating illegally and charging at like extra prices for the tourists. So that was very pivotal moment for President Lee's gubernatorial years. And then he actually nominated as a Democratic Party's presidential candidate, and as you may know, he lost to former President Yoon Suk-yeol. And then he elected as a National Assemblyman, and in 2022 as in a by-election for Incheon Gayang district, and later elected a Democratic Party leader. But however, during his leadership as a Democratic Party, right after the president election, he went to five trials. He was accused. He was indicted of violating election law and illegal money transfer to North Korea, and these kind of judicial risks were ignited. Um, Though they acquitted in an election law case on appeal, the Supreme Court actually later reversed to a guilty verdict, reviving judicial risks. However, after that, the retrial was postponed until after the president's election. So it eased the judicial pressure. So it enabled him to ultimately secure the presidency during his last election this year. So this is actually the policy priorities and objectives of the Lee administration. The Lee Jae-myung administration has two names at this point. Of course, the Lee Jae-myung administration is more official name, but also second name is the government of popular sovereignty. I think the main reasoning behind of this name, after experiencing the martial law crisis, I believe the President Lee and the Democratic Party became clear that a true democracy requires the daily implementation of the principle of popular sovereignty inherent in Korean constitution. So I think the president's emphasis on a government of popular sovereignty reflects this very idea. So, in order to accomplish his agenda here, there are five main policy priorities for the Lee Jae-myung administration policy agendas. The first one is the politics of national unity. So it tries to reunite the people regardless of the factions and political ideologies. And the second one is innovative economy, including AI and other cutting edge industries. The third one is balanced growth. I think it's related to his major welfare policies back in his time as a mayor of Seongnam, the governor of Gyeonggi province. So he tries to give some kind of the comprehensive welfare policies and a society with strong foundation. The fourth means that more about the disaster management and more strong societal foundation to keep up that kind of the management. And the last but not least, the pragmatic diplomacy and security centered on national interest. So let me begin with his foreign policy agenda. I think many of you already heard about it. It's so I just want to basically touch upon and go to the next slide. So it's about the pragmatic diplomacy has been emphasized by President Lee since the last election. I mean 2021 election. 2022 election. So he pursues development of the relations with the U.S., Japan, China, Russia at the same time, and also tries to strengthen the contribution and participation in our international community. It's like a G7 plus level diplomacy. I think it's kind of like similar to previous Yoon administration's GPS, the Global Pivotal State Diplomacy. So it's actually tries to strengthen the contribution and participation in an overall international community. And of course, he wants to enhance capabilities when it comes to economic diplomacy and denuclearization of North Korea. So he actually has six policy implementation plans to achieve this agenda. So these were actually reflected on national policy planning committees, each national policy planning committees Lee Jae-myung administration's policy plan that was on public, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So this election was a by-election after the impeachment. So the Lee administration didn't have a time to launch the transition committee. So instead of that, actually, the policy planning committee worked as a presidential transition committee. So they actually developed these agendas publicly for the next 5 years. So the first one is the develop the Iraq-U.S. alliance into a forward-looking and comprehensive strategic partnership. I think especially including the MASCA project, which was highlighted during the recent Korea-U.S. summit, which is Make American Shipyards Great Again. So I think the president wants to make more comprehensive partnership that can be more helpful for each other countries, and also the strengths in the Iraq-Japan relations, especially emphasizing shuttle diplomacy. So shuttle diplomacy means that the leadership of Korea and Japan have more exchanges and to have to strengthen the cooperation between two countries bilaterally. And as a result, I think President Lee went to Japan, as you've seen, 2 weeks ago. I think that was the first foreign nation he visited. And the third one is the advanced Korea-China relations into a strategic cooperative partnership. And fourth, promote stable management and development of Korea-Russia relations. I'm gonna touch upon the Korea-Russia relations part later on in more detail. And also denuclearization and establishment a peaceful structure of the Korean Peninsula. And I think the most important task for at this moment is the APEC of 2025 in Gyeongju, which is a historic city of South Korea. I think it's from October 31st to November 1st. And President Trump and President Xi, they will be there. And also, Democratic Party hopes that any kind of North Korean delegation should visit to APEC, but they haven't responded. Um, so the Korea-EU relations under the Lee administration first. The Lee administration explicitly mentioned that they're seeking diplomatic diversification, and which means that they want to adapt to flexibility to the international environment by deepening strategic cooperation with like-minded countries like in Europe and in the Pacific, as well as the partners in the Middle East and the Global South. So as a result, on the occasion of the G7 meeting 3 months ago, the President Lee met the EU leadership for the first time and marking the 15th anniversary of the strategic partnership. And July, the Lee administration sent the presidential special envoy to the European Union, and they discussed the hosting of the next Korea EU summit. As you can see on the pictures, I think on the right side, that's the presidential special envoy. The head of the delegation was in the second. His name's Yoon Yo-jun. He's a former the congressman, and is a very senior politician in Democratic Party at this point. And he sent him to kind of discuss the possible summit. So overall, I think the under the Lee administration, Korea-E relations are expected to strengthen through enhanced cooperation in security, defense, and digital sectors. However, policies aimed at the stable management and development of Korea-Russia relations could act as a variable. I would more the more detailed discussion of Korea-Russia relations will follow later. Just gonna touch upon that as well. First and foremost, I think the Lee administration is very much focused on restoring inter-Korean relations. So there are some five main policy goals and plans for him. The first one is, of course, to resume inter-Korean dialogue and restore communication channels. And second, to reduce military tensions. And he explicitly mentioned that wants to restore the September 19th agreement. So I just want to let you know that the September 19th military agreement was signed during the third Inter-Korean Summit. I think it was in 2018. And it was effectively nullified after North Korea's declaration of a complete withdrawal in 2023. So the agreement included commitments to cease all hostile acts and suspend various military exercises targeting each other near the military demarcation line. However, according to I think 2023 South Korea's defense white paper, North Korea violated the agreement on at least 17 occasions, including coastal artillery fire and drone incursions and gunfire at the DMZ, the guard posts and MDL area. And also the Lee administration to support diverse civilian exchanges and promote denuclearization and wants to be a facilitator of the North Korea-US negotiations through a more incremental approach. And also, lastly, the Lee administration wants to pursue the conclusion of a basic inter-Korean agreement. So I think this idea that is the plans to pursue an agreement on principles and norms for peaceful coexistence between South and North Korea. I think it's referencing from 1972 basic treaty between East and West Germany. The treaty was concluded with the goal of mutual recognition as sovereign states and the normalization of relations. So I think in this context, the Lee administration proposed the Indo-Korean Basic Agreement is interpreted as an effort to elevate the former 1991 Indo-Korean Basic Agreement to a higher level. So they try to be more have peaceful coexistence with a legally binding agreement. And then, so there are also main five actions taken since the government's inauguration. The first one is the suspension of broadcast toward North Korea that was operated more than 50 years by the National Intelligence Service and also the military. And the second one is the removal of loudspeakers aimed at North Korea. I think many of you already noticed that. And the third one is pretty much controversial, to be honest. It's about the publication of the North Korean Human Rights Report in a non-public format. So, according to North Korean Human Rights Act of South Korea, the government has to publish the North Korean Human Rights Report annually. But I think the right after the inauguration, the Ministry of Education kind of the in between publicizing or not publicizing this report in a format. But I think after some criticism, they decided to publicize the North Korean Human Rights Report, but in a non-public format. So there was kind of some internal conflict when it comes to address this North Korean human rights policy because I think the Lee administration want provoke the North Korean regime by addressing human rights publicly. And also, there was a Liberation Day address on August 15th. He said he would reject observative unification, and he expressed the will to resume dialogue to North Korea. And Lee-Trump summit was also showed that the Trump is interested in engaging with North Korea, and also President Lee wants to be a facilitator of that kind of summit. And yesterday, I think many of you watched it about it during the Chinese military parade. The National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik met Kim Jong-un, and they shake their hands, but nothing really was discussed because there's just no, to be honest, North Korea is not really willing to engage with South Korea at this time. So I think they just shook their hands and that's over, unfortunately. Next, I'd like to touch upon the national defense policies. The first one is strengthening military capabilities. Especially, this administration emphasized the advancement of the Korea-style three-axis system. So enhanced surveillance, reconnaissance, and capabilities, a skill chain. That's the main idea by the satellite. And the second one is KAMD. It's about the defense capabilities, Korea Air Missile Defense System, including THAAD. It's the Terminal High Altitude Air Defense Missile that could target the North Korea's nuclear missiles at the same time. And the third one is retaliation capabilities, which means Korea massive punishment and retaliation capabilities. And also, the Lee administration is trying to establish a space strategy command, which is equivalent to the U.S., not quite equivalent, but similar to the U.S. Space Command and Space Forces. And also, for the future warfare, I think would like to enhance the manned and unmanned integrated systems, drones, and AI technologies, of course. So a few days ago, Lee administration actually proposed the next fiscal year defense budget, and next year defense budget has been set at 66 trillion won, which means I think about 45 to 50 billion US dollars, marking an 8.2% increase from the previous year. That was the highest growth in 7 years. So especially they wanted to focus on the capabilities of the three-axis system for deterrence measures. And the second one is was the most controversial topic is the transferring a wartime operation control, the OPCON, um, because the new defense minister and the Lee administration kind of pledged to transfer the OPCON within his presidential term. So the transfer of the wartime operation control has been a long-standing Korea-U.S. alliance issue for nearly 2 decades. It allows Korea's four-star general rather than a U.S. four-star general to exercise command authority during the wartime. So in back in 2006, during the Nomu현 administration, Seoul and Washington agreed to transfer OPCON by 2012. However, under the Lee Myung-bak administration, when the administration changed to the conservative administration, the transfer was postponed to 2015, and then the Park Geun-hye administration, which is the next administration, and both sides agreed to make the transfer conditional rather than time-bound. So in 2014, the two allies kind of agreed on three conditions for OPCON transfer. The first one is South Korea's acquisition of the military capabilities to lead the combined defense posture. And the second, the alliance's comprehensive ability to counter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. And the last one is the security environment on the Korean Peninsula and the region conducive to a stable transfer. So I think the most important part is Democratic Party wants it was the long-standing assignment for them to transfer the OPCON because I think it's more related to their self-reliant defense policy. But however, on the other side, maybe the conservative faction and the People Power Party politicians, they think that the most technical and practical obstacle remains that the surveillance and reconnaissance capability gap between the US and Korea. At this point, South Korea has heavily relied on US strategic reconnaissance and assets and intelligence infrastructures stationed on the peninsula. So once OPCON is transferred, however, the South Korean military will bear full responsibility for intelligence collection, assessment, any kind of operational planning. So I think it's about the question whether South Korea can actually take the whole full responsibility at this moment. So I think the conservative faction criticized this kind of the policy because South Korea needs to develop its own surveillance reconnaissance capabilities first, and then we should be transferring the wartime operation control back to Korea. So that's the main reason behind that. Also, the Lee administration wants to the military system reform because of the martial law incident. So reorganize the Marine Corps under a quasi-four branch system, and especially the Counterintelligence Command, which is very controversial right now, since they're due to their involvement in the martial law incident in this last December. So the Lee administration decided first actually decided to dismantle the command, but later on they kind of like readjusted the agenda. So now I think they just wanted to retain only counterintelligence functions. And they try to improve overall military service conditions and also to expand female military personnel. So let's move on to domestic policies. The first and foremost, the prosecutorial reform. The Democratic Power Party believes that the prosecution has historically conducted investigations for political purposes under the previous administration. And it also views that the concentration of both investigative and prosecutorial powers within the prosecution service as raising serious concerns over a potential abuse of authority. And especially Lee administration has a lot of reasoning like that because I think from the Democratic Party's point of view, President Lee was politically targeted by the persecution service under the President Yoon. So, and he went through five different trials. I think that's the main reason that the Democratic Party wants to prioritize the persecutor reform as as a domestic policy agenda. So they try to fully separate the investigation and prosecution service. And also, Democratic Party, the new leader, Jung Chung-lee, he aims to pass this legislation to dismantle the current prosecutor's office before the Chuseok holiday in October. So they want to mainly divide the current system into the new public prosecution service, and also central investigation for major crimes, and also the corruption investigation office for high-ranking officials and the police. So they just want to divide the prosecutor services power to different institutions and organizations. The other one is the judicial system reform. I think it has not been really set up yet, but the Lee administration aims to gradually increase the number of Supreme Court justices and judges and expand the scope of citizen participation trials as well. It'd be more transparent. The second agenda is constitutional amendment. So the National Policy Planning Committee announced the constitutional reform as its first national priority. So there was a lot of debates over the 1987 constitutional framework, which is the current constitutional framework, and it was ignited after the martial law crisis, Korea. So I think there are a lot of criticism when it comes to the president-centered power and his dominant power. So I think the new constitutional reform tries to separate his centered power to the National Assembly and for the people. I think that's the reason why there has been a lot of discussions between Democratic Party and People Power Party when it comes to constitutional amendment. According to the Speaker, National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik, constitutional referendum may coincide with the 2026 next year's local election, but it's not really confirmed yet. He just suggested for that. So the key constitutional amendment agenda is including the spirit of the May 18th Gwangju democratization movement in the preamble. And I think the most important part is the strengthening the presidential accountability and decentralized authority. It is currently debating, but I think a lot of people kind of like think that the introducing a 4-year renewable term and runoff election system would be discussed for this constitutional amendment agenda. I think that's the most important part because we have to try to shift the current presidential system. So and also they want to especially Democratic Party wants to restrict the presence of veto power because former President Yoon he used his lot of veto powers against Democratic Party, and also they want to strengthen the parliamentary control over any kind of martial law and emergency orders, of course, and also try to abolish the prosecution authority to request warrants at the same time. The third one, I think this is very, I think the hottest topic right now in Korea. So currently there are three special counsels conducting the investigation targeting the former president and the Yoon administration. The first one is the Martial Law and Insurrection Special Counsel. This special counsel investigates all cases related to the December 3rd martial law crisis. So it's including any kind of drone incursions that would could provoke North Korea back in the Yoon administration, which is a very controversial topic, and all the military personnel who involved in these matters, and including also the cabinet members who actually agreed during the meeting with President Yoon. And the second one is the most widest investigation at this point. I think the Kim Gun-hee Special Counsel. It investigates allegations of stock manipulation involving former First Lady Kim Gun-hee and the People Power Party's Myung Tae-gyun case. So Myung Tae-gyun case is I just want to simply describe it. So Myung Tae-gyun is a guy who was involved in People Power Party's primary in last general election. He was a local political consultant in Gyeongsang-namdo area, South Gyeongsang province, and he kind of like abused his power to kind of modify the primary results of People Power Party back in 2021, 2024 general election, 2023 by election for the primary purposes. And the third one is Fallen Marine Special Counsel. It investigates allegations of obstruction and cover-up related to the investigation into the deaths of fallen Marine. I just want to introduce this case very briefly. So, 2 years ago, during the heavy rain disaster on the Korean Peninsula, there's a Marine Corporal Che was swept away by strong currents while conducting a search operations for missing persons and was found dead 14 hours later. So after that, an investigation was launched into who had given the excessive order to continue the search in the midst of this kind of like torrential rain. So allegations have since emerged that the then commander of Marine Corps' First Division had issued the order, and later he lobbied the Yoon government in attempt to protect himself. So that's kind of related, very complicated matter, but that's the brief the description of the case. So the special counsels were appointed in June. So now it's been a maximum up to 90 days. So I think it's until the end of this month. So the problem is for the People Power Party is that the comprehensive investigations are ongoing into high-ranking officials, like including the People Power Party's lawmaker, former prime minister, former defense minister. So I think it's all affiliated with the conservative faction at this point. So I think that would be very much hurtful for the People Power Party at this point. Let me touch upon the key appointments in the Lee administration. When it comes to foreign security policy, there are eight main officials at this point. So from the top left, it's Prime Minister Kim Min-seok. He's a four-term congressman, and he is a very notable person when back in the 1980s, and he was the leader of the student activism of the Korean democratization movement. He was the Seoul National University's student council president during that time, and he studied in China and the U.S. and now it's very much he was the campaign manager for President Lee during the last election. So he became very famous, and he actually predicted the martial law crisis a year ago. So that's the main reason he became more renowned person. And the second one is Ambassador Wee Sung-lak. He's now the National Security Advisor to President Lee. And he was a former ambassador to Russia, and he was a Director General of North American Affairs at MOFA, Korea. And he was also the most closest foreign policy advisor to Lee Jae-myung since the 2022 election. And the third one is Lee Jong-seok. He's a director of National Intelligence Service, and he used to be a unification minister under Roh Moo-hyun administration back in 2006. And he is a very much expert on North Korean related matters. And now he back on his job as a director of national intelligence. I think the main reasoning back there is try to resume the inter-Korean dialogue more informally. I think that's the main reasoning for that personnel. And the fourth is Cho Hyun is Minister of Foreign Affairs. He was a former ambassador to Austria and India and the United Nations, and he served the first and second vice foreign minister during the Moon Jae-in administration. And on the right, left, no, no, left, second row on the left, the Jung Dong-hyung is a minister of unification. Actually, he was the unification minister 20 years ago in 2006, also during Roh Moo-hyun administration, and he was also the presidential candidate in 2007 as a Democratic Party's official candidate. And actually, there's a fun story that President Lee was actually the part of Jung Dong-hyung's political faction in back in 2006. So he supported kind of like small gatherings of the Jung Dong-hyung political small gatherings, and he was chairing. The Lee Jae-myung was chairing that kind of small group of supporting Jung Dong-hyung in 2007 during the election. So they're very close each other. And the other one is Kim Jong-un is a Minister of Trade, and he Minister of Trade, Industry, and Energy, and he was a former Minister of Economy and Finance official, and also the CEO of Doosan Group. And the third one is Dr. Hong Hyun-ik. He was the chair of the Foreign Security Subcommittee at the National Policy Planning Committee. And he was also the foreign policy advisor to Lee Jae-myung during the campaign. He's an expert on Russian matters, so he's a kind of the Russian expert. And the last one is Yohan Gu, is a trade minister, and he was also the trade minister in the past during the Moon administration. So their big point is that there's a notable return of officials from the Roh Moo-hyun administration, especially the director of NIS Lee Jong-seok and Unification Minister Jung Dong-hyung, and they were involved in inter-Korean summits in Roh Moo-hyun administration and North Korea related matters. So I think it shows this administration's commitment to improving inter-Korean relations and restoring dialogue channels at this point. And also, there is a lot of speculation that there have been observed differences in foreign and security policy views between the alliance faction and self-reliance faction. So, alliance faction means it's more concentrated on strengthening the U.S.-Korea alliances with like-minded partners. And also, the self-reliance faction is more focused on transferring the OPCON, the operational control, and managing good relationship with China and Russia at the same time. So there were two main factions since the 2022 election within Lee Jae-myung's campaign. The National Security Advisor Ri Sung-lak was kind of the head of alliance faction, and NIS Director Lee Jong-seok was kind of head of the self-reliance faction. So there was kind of like internal debates were still going on, and that was reflected on the last NATO summit participation in June. Actually, there was kind of like a lot of internal debates when it comes to participating in NATO summit during that time. And also, this is just more at a glance, the least closest eight is actually Seongnam and Gyeonggi team. And also, there's a seven-person faction. I just want to introduce this guys first. It's pretty much interesting one. So the present Lee's closest aides consist of Seongnam and Gyeonggi team, who have worked with him since his mayoral and gubernatorial years, and a core faction within the Democratic Party. So President Lee is not from the Democratic Party's mainstream, so he relies on these aides and who now hold key posts in the presidential office. So President Lee does not come from the mainstream faction of the Democratic Party. The party's mainstream faction is composed of former student activists from the democratization movement of the 1970s and 80s, and many of whom went on to serve as a key officials and political leaders during the Moon Jae-in administration. So they have some kind of different factions. So let me just point out a few people here. You can see Jung Jin-sang. He was the actually the original President Lee's closest aide. But since his detention, and now while he is out on bail, the Kim Hyun-ji, the presidential secretary for general affairs, she is the most trusted and influential confidant of President Lee. So she has maintained ties with President Lee since the 1990s, beginning with their connection in Seongnam City. So actually, she is kind of like working as a Susie Wiles of White House chief of staff at this point. So like her, she's the most trusted aide of President Lee. So she is in charge of taking care of all the personal matters and also all the political matters, and kind of like try to adjust and modify all the policy priorities at the same time as well. And also, Chung Song-ho is a Minister of Justice, and he's the main uh, people of the core Democratic Party faction, and he was the friend of President Lee during their times at the Judicial Training Institute when right after they passed the bar exam in 1986. So they have been 40 years of friendship, and he's the most closest advisor to President Lee at this point. So overall, domestic political landscape. So the Congressman Jung Chung-lee took office as the new party leader. He is considered to be a hardline faction, the most hardline faction within the DP, and he's of course pro-Lee. But to be honest, all Democratic Party members at this point are pro-Lee faction. And so during the campaign, he promised to complete reforms like lightning. So he actually is aiming to finalize all the important reforms before Chuseok holiday in October. And he refuses to cooperate with the People Power Party, adopting a hardline stance, citing the People Power Party's potential rebellion forces. So intensifying confrontation with the opposition is very much expected. On the other hand, the People Power Party, the Congressman Jang Dong-hyuk is a two-term congressman, was elected as the new leader, and he's from the anti-impeachment faction. Um, excuse me. Since he assumed the leadership of People Power Party, and he has been distancing himself from the party's hardline faction, and he is now strategically positioning to appeal to centrist voters ahead of the upcoming local elections next year. But at the same time, within the People Power Party, Kim Min-soo, who rose to party leadership backed by anti-impeachment forces, has been consistently delivering strong hardline statements. So this dynamic suggests that while the leader Zhang seeks to build the image of a rational and moderate conservative factions, and Kim Min-soo, he plays a complementary role by representing the more hardline party members who might otherwise feel disappointed. So, but still, there's a lot of intense party infighting over Yoon's impeachment within the party that was actually reflected during this the People Power Party's party convention. And so overall, the strong opposition to Lee administration is very much expected. But at this point, the Democratic Party has excessive majority in the National Assembly, so there will be a lot of confrontations as well. So there are three core issues and challenges of the Lee Jae-myung administration at this point. The first one would be the inter-Korean relations, and the second one is foreign and security policy, and third one is national unity and domestic political outlook. The first one is the future outlook and challenges when it comes to inter-Korean relations. So I very much respect that Lee administration is focused on restoring inter-Korean relations. I think it's very important. But I think at this point, when it comes to prospects for improvement, it really depends on North Korea's response, because North Korea is not really interested in engaging with South Korea at this point. But I think there's a very famous diplomatic phrase that it takes two to tango. So I understand the Lee administration put a lot of efforts to more unilaterally to North Korea when it comes to reducing the tensions between two Koreas. But at the same time, North Korea is not really responding to that kind of actions at this point. So all the efforts like basic agreement, dialogue resumption, and communication channels depend on Pyongyang's willingness. And due to North Korea's Russia partnership and two hostile states doctrine that was adopted by North Korea 2 years ago, and also the yesterday's Chinese Victory Day military parade, this trilateral partnership has been strengthened. So, and also Kim Yo-jong recently mentioned the Lee Jae-myung administration is that South Korea is not a diplomatic counterpart anymore, and inter-Korean reconciliation is an illusion. So I think it really depends on North Korea's perspective right now. For this point, I think that would be a very challenging moment for Lee Jae-myung because North Korea might be interested in engaging with Trump, but at this point, they're not really interested in engaging with Lee Jae-myung administration at this point. So that's the main agenda. And also the effectiveness of Seoul's measure for reconciliation, especially the suspension of propaganda broadcasts. That was a unilateral step ending a 50-year psychological tool. So there was raised question about the loss of information access for North Korean people. And the related to North Korean human rights issues, I think there's a lot of criticism when it comes to the policy continuity and commitment to universal values like human rights, because they are too much focused on the relationship with North Korean regime. So they don't want to provoke North Koreans. So that's the problem. And so overall, the bottom line is that I think it is important to have the dialogue between two Koreas, and it's very necessary. But I think at this point, unilateral gestures are unlikely to succeed. Um, to advance relations, I think the Korea must first establish clear and systemic goals and strategies rather than relying on symbolic concessions because South Korea removed its loudspeakers, but North Korea has not at least reciprocated and it has even expanded its own installations, suggesting a little likelihood of engagement. The second one is the foreign and security policy. So I think the most important concept is the modernization of the Korea-US alliance. And this wording, the strategic flexibility of US versus Korea, it's being really discussed in Korea right now. So this means that the US values a strategic flexibility because it allows the deployment of the US forces Korea to a Taiwan contingency without the consent of the South Korean government. But if, however, South Korea opposes strategic flexibility in order to prevent US versus Korea's involvement in a Taiwan crisis, Washington could simply redeploy the bulk of US forces here in Korea to another location, maybe in Guam or Yokosuka, and where there are no restrictions on their involvement. So in the end, the Lee administration could be forced into a binary choice, either tolerate US forces' involvement in a Taiwan contingency in order to minimize the risk of US troop withdrawals from the peninsula, or accept US forces Korea drawdowns in order to avoid being entangled in the Taiwan crisis. I think this really presents a significant challenge for the Lee administration, which currently seeks to maintain stable relationship with China and especially the Albert Colby is a Undersecretary of Defense at this point in the U.S. He has been pushing this idea for almost last 5 years, and but I think I heard that President Lee actually kind of like he didn't agree with this strategic flexibility concept during the last summit, but I think still the working level discussions are ongoing with the U.S. when it comes to accept this strategic flexibility. It's kind of like changing the main purpose of U.S. versus Korea and to strengthen the partnership. The second one is the Korea-Japan relations. It's currently, I think, very positive. And there's a but possible variables from a change of administration in Japan because Prime Minister Ishiba is losing his ground at this point. So there will be a new prime minister pretty much soon. So it really depends on the new Japanese prime minister's will, because if they do something kind of like historic flashback, I think that would really hurt the bilateral status. But at this point, Lee administration is very committed to strengthen the Rock-Japan relations, unlike the Moon administration. So I think it's currently very positive. There are two main obstacles, I guess. The first one is Korea-China relations. At this point, it's kind of like positive outlook in when it comes to Korea-China relations. And but during President Lee's visit to the United States, President Lee stated that the traditional approach of security with the U.S., economy with China is no longer viable. So after the statement, and Chinese really kind of like angered, and they also published some statements against President Lee. But however, the Lee administration sent the Speaker of National Assembly, Woo Won-sik, to the Chinese Victory Day military parade yesterday, and I think it showed the Lee administration's willingness to restore the relationship with China. And also, the National Security Advisor Ri Sung-lak explained that this President Lee's remark in the U.S. was intended to reflect the newly changing circumstances surrounding Korea, and he said that China remains historically and geographically important and therefore continues to be valued. So, and he kind of emphasized that among U.S. allies, South Korea is the only one to have sent a parliamentary speaker level delegation to Chinese Victory Day military parade. I think we and National Security Advisor we demonstrates that the weight Seoul still places on its relationship with Beijing. But he actually emphasized also that while the Korea-China relationship cannot be placed on the same level as Korea-US alliance, but it nonetheless remains significant. So they want to revive the relationship with China. But the problem is at this point, as I mentioned, when it comes to strategic flexibility of US versus Korea, I think that would really hinder overall effort of the Lee administration. Lastly, the Korea-Russia relations. I think it's a very important topic. I think at this point, North Korea and Russia's military cooperation and Russia's invasion of Ukraine make it necessary for South Korea to remain cautious in pursuing improved Korea-Russia relations and to uphold the rules-based international order. So accordingly, the Lee administration has also shown a prudent stance and cautious stance toward engaging in Russia. But however, during yesterday's Victory Day military parade in China, the National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik met with President Putin, and and the Speaker Woo requested greater attention to the 130 South Korean companies operating in Russia. While this may signal some potential rapprochement, it could also be interpreted as a problem-heading message given its implications for sanctions on Russia and broader international alignment. So I believe becoming overly focused on diplomacy with North Korea while rushing to improve relations with Russia would send the wrong signal to our like-minded partners in Europe and the US and other countries. So South Korea should demonstrate diplomacy that upholds the rules-based order and firmly opposes this kind of the revisionist powers at this point. The last one is about the national unity and political outlook. Since the Lee administration emphasized the national unity, but I think at this point the party leadership and the president office they don't really match about their views of People Power Party and conservative factions. So it is really hard to make bipartisan cooperation at this point. And also, two leaders are very hardliners, so a confrontation is expected. So that's also the bipartisan cooperation will remain difficult. And also, the scope of investigation by three special counsels in the previous administration further heightens political tension right now. Because I think today and yesterday, the one of the special counsels tried to search the People Power Party's main headquarters, and a lot of lawmakers were gathered together and tried to block that effort. And they're actually criticizing special counsel of abusing power and abusing and politically motivated investigations. So at this point, I mean. the Lee administration wants to reunite the people regardless of political ideologies or party affiliations after the martial law crisis. But I think at this point, it is really the confrontation is only left and or all hardliners and confronting each other, especially within the Democratic Party as well. So I think it's really hard to reunite people and have more bipartisan, more complement, more like bridging effort will be very difficult at this point. So that's kind of the big challenge for Lee administration, how to manage the party government relationship, and especially with the relationship with the opposition party and conservative faction overall. Lastly, I'd like to share my implications regarding the Lee administration's foreign policy and domestic policy. So, when it comes to interconnected relations, from my personal perspective, I think Lee administration needs more clear systemic goals and a comprehensive North Korean strategies. I understand and respect the Lee administration movement toward more peaceful approach to resuming dialogue and restoring communication channels. I think that's very important. But I think at this point, North Korea is unwilling to engage with South Korea, and how that's the main question remains. I mean, how to incentivize North Korea to come back on the table. But I think at this point, when I met the office government officials and other people, that's pretty much unclear at this point. They just wanted to ease tensions and peaceful coexistence. I think that's also important, but how to incentivize is missing. So I think the Lee administration should establish more clear systemic approach and by reassessing the strategic environment and what would be the new creative idea to incentivize North Korea to come back on the table. I think that's the main issue for the Lee administration. And also, I think it's very important to have the popular support and domestic consensus when it comes to securing transparency and continuity in North Korean policy, because North Korean related policy has been cut off every 5 years and dramatically shift from the administrations to administrations. It really depends on each party's ideology and policy outcomes. So I think at this point, we need to have some more bipartisan commissions and argument to have more comprehensive North Korean strategy that I think that make also North Korea to be more willing to engage with South Korea afterwards. And the foreign policy, I think South Korea must embrace more G7 diplomacy that requires responsibility and sacrifice, because I think South Korea wants to be an active player in an international community. But I think South Korea is not really willing to engage with more expanded ODA purposes or different types of development areas and cooperations. They're solely focused on some kind of like few nations at this point, mainly the US, Japan, and Russia and China. I think it needs to diversify and strengthen its commitment to universal values, rules-based order, human rights. I think that's the main issue and main obstacle for Lee administration to achieve this agenda. And lastly, I think I'd like to emphasize that the Lee administration must persuade ruling party leadership to realize inclusive leadership and cooperative politics when it comes to achieving national unity. And also, the conservative faction should take the responsibility for past crises, including the martial law impeachment, and reestablish its party framework for dialogue with the ruling party. So it's very complicated situation and a lot of um, obstacles for the Lee administration to implement its own national policy plans. But I think um, after readdressing these ideas and reassessing the current situation, I hope the Lee administration should achieve these goals. Thank you. And thank you very much for listening this long presentation. And this is my email. So if you guys have any questions or if you guys visit to South Korea, just let us know if you have any things, people to connect or network. And I'm very, very much happy to answer any questions you guys might have. Thank you.